All right, let's go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone that's taken the time to join us today, really to help you understand more about saving money during the process of obtaining your CMMC assessment. It's a long process. It's an important process, and we're going to help you understand, really from several different points of view, how you can save money in this process and time and make it a much more manageable event. So let's go ahead and get started with introductions. My name is Vince Petrecka. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Business Development at PreVeil. And PreVeil is a Boston-based company. I'm sure some of you are mostly familiar with us, but we have a NIST CMMC compliant platform that has encrypted email and file storage and sharing in it. We're going to talk about other capabilities within our solution offering today that make it easier for you to save money in the CMMC compliance journey. Greg, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks, Vince. Hi, Greg LaRoche. I'm the head of products and compliance at PreVeil. And the compliance team at PreVeil actually created a lot of the content and materials that we're going to be reviewing a little bit later in the agenda. So looking forward to showing you that.
Stephen?
Sure. Steve Pratt. I work at Centaur. We're a C3PAO. I'm a CCA and also the Director of Programs over our CMMC and FedRAT work.
Very good. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. Centaur is one of our valuable partners. Enjoy working with you guys every day, and I know you do some very important work for our customers. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so today's focus is really the PreVeil Compliance Accelerator and how the PreVeil Compliance Accelerator can really assist you in saving time and money in your process, in your journey to CMMC compliance. The PreVeil Compliance Accelerator are really fundamentally developed by Greg LaRoche and his team. Greg is with us here today at PreVeil. Is a comprehensive and cost-effective approach really to helping you address your CMMC compliance journey and ultimately being able to work with an assessor like Stephen and the Centaur team to be fully certified as CMMC compliant. But before we go into that in detail, just to remind kind of the three principal value-add components of PreVeil's overall solution for companies. First and foremost with PreVeil, we are a DFARS 7012 compliant platform. So a simple, secure method for managing your controlled and classified information and ITAR. We handle encrypted email. We handle encrypted file storage and sharing. It's extremely easy to use. Extremely easy to manage PreVeil. All your encrypted data is stored in the FedRAMP High AWS GovCloud, and PreVeil meets all the requirements from the DoD for the DFARS compliance of our platform. So that's there today. In this middle area is what we're going to focus on today, PreVeil's Compliance Accelerator, really supporting documentation education that can really speed you on your journey to compliance. This is pre-filled compliance documents. The Compliance Accelerator is actually going to provide support and help you address all 110 of the 110 NIST controls. Not all of those are covered by PreVeil specifically, the PreVeil system specifically, but our compliance package will provide that level of support. And then finally, the third leg of the stool for PreVeil customers is our certified RPO and our preferred C3PAO CMMC partner community, of which Centaur is part of that. By working with partners that are familiar with PreVeil, that have been trained on PreVeil, know how PreVeil works, understands our compliance offering, our encryption model, our documentation, it'll be a much more streamlined and cost-effective approach to getting through the last hurdle in this process, which is your CMMC assessment. And just provide a note here is that PreVeil customers have already had success in their full CMMC compliance audits. 12 PreVeil customers have received perfect 110 of 110 joint surveillance voluntary assessment scores in the last 8 or 9 months. Okay, so the Compliance Accelerator at a high level. Really what we're looking to do for PreVeil customers is save hundreds of hours on the documentation preparation activity here. Help them save tens of thousands of dollars by not outsourcing a lot of the core document creation that's required here as part of your CMMC journey, and ensure quality of these materials as not only was this documentation developed by CMMC certified professionals, but it's been reviewed by partners of ours that are authorized C3 PAOs. We're going to provide a full knowledge base, and Greg's going to show you later exactly how that knowledge base is put together. We're going to show you how that's incorporated into a learning management system, which guides you through the process to compliance. And in addition to this, throughout all of this, you'll have access to live support from PreVeil's compliance professionals. So Greg, let me turn it over to you for kind of the high-level description of the PreVeil Accelerator as a complete compliance solution for PreVeil customers.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, so I think I'll go back to the mission first, because I had noticed a couple of questions coming in that folks are interested in comparing this to, say, some of the materials PreVeil has historically offered customers. So what we learned in engaging with over 1,500 small and mid-sized businesses in the defense industrial base is that they often don't have on board compliance expertise on staff. They often don't have dedicated resources, maybe not even IT resources when they're using managed services and things like that. So we've created and offered over the years a really solid library of materials and documentation. But what we got feedback on from companies is like, well, where do we start? And how do we get through this? And which documents do we look at first? And so we figured out pretty quickly what we were lacking is the structure to put around all this material, which is really what the PreVeil Accelerator is and what we're going to show you in a few minutes. But really there's three main areas or parts of the PreVeil Accelerator content. And one of the key parts is the documentation that, some of which has been previously offered alongside the product, but now is structured into an actual training regimen and a methodology. So the kinds of documents that PreVeil provides customers that take advantage of the accelerator, they get pre-filled system security plan document, a customer responsibility matrix that goes into a very deep detail on, for each and every control and each and every assessment objective of each and every control, what other responsibilities, what is inherited from the technology product you're using like PreVeil, what is required the customer to do, what things are additional. And also, there's a plan of action, a milestone template that goes along with that to help you track items as you're getting through your journey. So there's a lot of information there that's documentation. In addition to the base documents like a system security plan, we also have procedures and diagrams and guides and all these things that are intended to help attack various parts of the compliance requirements that you're going to have to meet along the way. So that's kind of one thing, is the core documentation. But what's really very useful is all of those materials are now brought into context through a video series. So there's a 10-step process that we're going to introduce that is really your journey to compliance. And at each and every step, there's materials that get attached to each step so that customers going through this process can go right through it in sequence. It's a recommended sequence. It's now been proven and tested in the real world, as Vince said earlier, and really can take a company with limited compliance experience and resources and really help you move along. And all of that is part of the learning management system implementation. So all of this material has been combined and loaded into a curriculum that has a series of courses that a customer representative will go through and actually follow the process and access the materials in the right sequence and really eliminate a lot of the confusion and save a lot of time and energy as opposed to outsourcing all of this work, which is an option. And some of our customers, choose that as a preferred approach. But for those that want to do more of the work internally, this is the kind of training and materials that you'll find really valuable.
Great overview. Stephen, interested in your thoughts on sort of the comprehensive nature of what PreVeil's providing here. You have obviously the best idea of the group here as to what you're expecting to see when defense contract organizations come to Centaur and are, presenting their documentation set, need to have a certain level of education on this. Just kind of maybe you can provide some color on whether we're hitting the right notes here, which are kind of most important from your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's great that you guys are including the documentation as a key component of this. So many people are lacking in having the right policies, processes, and guidelines in place that are really a essential part to CMMC compliance. The SSP is the core document that is required. And in fact, for those of you that are considering a JSV or have had a DIPCAC assessment, or even had to put your score into SPRS to show what your current compliance level is, you can't do that without an SSP. That's the one practice within NIST 171 that doesn't have a score number, because if you don't have that SSP, you can't do the rest of it. So that is your key index for what you need. Policies and procedures. There was a big misnomer when we moved to CMMC 2.0 that those were no longer required, but they're part of NIST 171 as well. So you really need those everywhere where you see the phrase define or specify in a control. That means that it has to be documented somewhere, and if you don't have that documentation, you're not going to meet those requirements.
Yeah. Great. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's a lot of what we were thinking. I want to note just a couple things here too, is that some people hear about NIST documentation out there or templates and things like that. Be very clear that these are not just templates. These are not just formats for the way these need to be organized before you present them to a C3PO or the DoD or even your customers. These have real content in them. These are real samples based on our experience working with our customer base of what this content needs to look like for you to be judged as meeting the requirements. Greg, maybe you can explain just a little bit on the standard operating procedures that we provide here, how those were created in terms of, sample company.
Sure. Of course, every company is different, and, we can't provide a document that will automatically 100% fit every company in our market. So what we did is we created a typical defense industrial based company we called Acme Corp internally. And for Acme, we created a complete compliance package for them. And even though the company doesn't exist, it represents an average small to mid-sized DIP company that has on-site and remote people, has typical networking that includes commercial network infrastructure alongside their PreVeil network infrastructure in an enclave approach. And so all the procedures, diagrams, all the documentation that goes along with Acme is available as part of this training curriculum, and really gives you a good example of what these documents should look like and what they should contain, and really gives it, most DIB companies a really good starting point for having and creating documents that actually 100% match what they're doing in their company.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying. And our objective here with this as well is to make sure that we're essentially providing all the documentation, the baseline for all the documentation that you'll need as part of your assessment journey. Of course, there'll need to be customization for your business processes, for the way your workflows are enabled at your particular organization. But the core is there for you to work with. And in some cases, you may decide that you can work with the process that we've defined, and maybe that's the best path forward for you. Okay, so finally we got to the 10 steps. Here's what the 10 steps are all about. So the framework is this Compliance Accelerator that goes along with the PreVeil system and with the PreVeil partner community. Within the Compliance Accelerator, we have the learning management system that's providing this information. And the learning management system with the Compliance Accelerator is set up in 10 steps. So now you can follow this process and follow the appropriate documentation at the right times as you need it. And here are the 10 steps. And I've highlighted a few of them in bold because we're going to be diving into those in another layer of detail a little later on in the program. But I just want to point one thing out, is that not included in the 10 steps is sort of step number 1. Or the 0, step number 0, I guess, before you start. And that is, we're going to recommend that whenever possible, you select and deploy your DFARS compliance system protect CUI right away. We'll talk about that in more detail in a minute. But first, I want to just turn it over to Greg for a second. Greg, maybe you can explain just these 10 steps at a high level. I know we're going to dig into a few of them in more detail, but how did we come up with these 10 steps? Why did these make sense for us and for our partners?
Sure, I'll get into that a little bit. Basically, the genesis of this methodology came out of our compliance team here at PreVeil, but it's also done in collaboration and cooperation with a lot of our partners. So we have obviously partners in our ecosystem that are assisting customers through this journey, and collaborating with them and coming up with this methodology really with a couple of main goals. One was to keep it simple and straightforward so that anyone could follow it, that wanted to invest the time, and make it nonetheless comprehensive, so they covered everything they might need to do. And so it starts out with scoping, and we'll talk about scoping a little bit more later on when we dive into a few of these. But really, that makes sense. Let's understand where the COI is. Now I have my deployed system, my enclave, or my repository for this information. Where else might COI be? How do we control it? Where does it go? And then once you really understand what your compliance boundary is going to be all about, this is when you really want to dive into the requirements, learning about the NIST 800-171 and the CMMC requirements for level 2, and how COI needs to be protected, and what are the 110 controls, and what do they mean? And then once you've got there, now you can conduct a self-assessment. Okay, where am I today? And there's a methodology and checklist in our materials, and help companies understand where their starting point is. And now they're identifying and categorizing gaps, and they're creating their plan of action and milestone. And now they're executing their plan. They're meeting the team. They have assignments. They have responsible persons, and they're implementing changes in their program to achieve the compliance objectives and close those gaps. And as they're doing through that, they're documenting it. So they're tweaking their system security plan, customizing it, attaching supporting documents where relevant, thinking ahead to artifacts and evidence, saying, how am I going to prove that this control is operating as intended and is in place? And so when an assessor comes later, and now you're updating your documentation and your plan of action and milestone as you're working your plan. So the middle part of this system could be recursive. You could get to the point where you're at step 8. Are we ready now? Are we ready for the next step? Or it's okay, we're not ready. Let's go back to step 5 and step 4 and close more gaps, execute more changes, update more documents, then get back to step 8. Okay, now we're ready. Now we have an optional step. Do I want a third party to come in and validate all the work I've done? Do I want a third party to come in and do a gap assessment, for example, so that they're double checking everything I think I'm doing correctly with a third party perspective? So that's often the customers will do that. And lastly, you schedule your C3PAO assessment, you get on the calendar, and you get your assessment accomplished from a position of great confidence that you've done all the previous steps, and you're in good shape to score well on your assessment.
And fundamentally, by following these 10 steps and leveraging the information and documentation and training that PreVeil is providing as part of this, we believe that the average customer is going to save at least 60% off other alternatives for managing this process. That's where the saving money is. It's significant. The time savings is significant, and the dollar savings is significant in following this process.
That's Bill, let me take over sharing. You want to dive in and take a look at the LMS now? And
yeah, why don't we do that?
So this is the main learner's experience within the learning management system. And so this is when you get access to the accelerator content. This is what you're going to see when you join, and you log in and you get access to all these courses. You'll see the first one is the intro, and this is a video and introductory materials that really talks about how the whole system works. There's some additional resources. There's compliance checklist and some additional things that are even you might want to look at even before you engage in the 10-step program. There's a couple step 0 videos which really are optional if you don't know whether or not you need a compliance consultant. There's some advice in there on what are the criteria you might want to think about when deciding whether or not you need one, and how do you choose one. And subcontractors, same thing. Like, how do I interact? How do subcontractors fit into my program? So these are common areas of confusion we hear in our customer base. And so extra materials there are available, but then we get into step 1. So step one, scoping your boundary. I'm going to dive into that one and show you the unit, some of the elements of this unit, so you can get a feel for what one of the steps in the process might look like. So if I'm in step one, launched, I will see several different aspects of the course. The first one is a video that you watch and walks you through the whole topic of scoping your boundary from top to bottom. And this is a regular video player. You can make it big if you want. It's small in this current view. And then you also notice other content that goes with your course. And this is true for every unit in the program. So as you go through these courses, there'll be a video, there'll be a corresponding document that puts a narrative that very much covers similar content as the video in a little more detail. And then there'll be other documents, other resources that help you with that particular step. In this case, understanding the cybersecurity framework. This is a NIST document, the CMMC scoping guide, the CMMC assessment guide. These are really useful documents in understanding how to scope your boundary. And then there's also an example flow diagram in here. If we'll look at that in a second. But just start off with the video content, just get a feel for, there's just I'll just play a few seconds of it so you can see the idea.
This video will review some tips and tricks to help you scope your compliance boundary and set your compliance implementation up for success. Now let's actually dive into scoping your boundary. The first thing that we need to talk about is how CUI enters your organization. Now, if you don't have any CUI right now, go ahead and imagine that if you did have CUI, how would it enter your organization?
All right, I'll pause there, but you can see the idea. We're really getting into explaining the concepts behind scoping and giving you example artifacts like this flow diagram is a good example. So here's a diagram of this is Acme Corp's diagram, right? So Acme Corp has this CUI flow and these commercial products that are integrated in alongside their CUI enclave using PreVeil. So these are just the idea that you can understand where CUI flows in your organization, including a good example that's available to you, and like I said, other documentation as well. So the actual scoping document that corresponds with the video is here, so you can follow along with the video, or want more additional information about any particular step that gets talked about in the video. That's going to be all right here. So you have all the detail you need. And so for people that are more literal learners versus visual learners, you have all the different bases covered here. So hopefully that gives you a good feel for what the experience will be like as a student within the PreVeil Compliance Accelerator Program. And as you see, these steps will go right through till the end, till step 10. So thanks for that. I think next we wanted to dive into a few of these steps in particular and really get more perspectives from Centaur and from their perspective as an assessor, what they look for in these particular areas as well.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Greg. Really an excellent setup. That learning management system will track for all the users for your organization, where you are in the process. It'll show what modules have been completed. It'll track that for you. You'll always have access to go back to previous information there as well. So really useful and an easy way to manage your compliance process and your education as part of that. Okay, so let's go through it again. I want to go back to step 0 again, real quickly on this. And again, a recommendation, from PreVeil is in most cases, as long as you have a general understanding of your workflow and your flow of CUI, what that is or will be in the organization, knowing what your basic requirements are for handling CUI, that you should be able to select. There aren't that many options out there that are certified. Which one is best for you to work with? And the reason to do it early in the process are kind of, there's a few key reasons for that. One is that this is all about protecting the data. Most of the organizations we work with are currently today not protecting their content in a manner that has the appropriate encryption, has the appropriate security in the cloud, et cetera. So by immediately moving any existing CUI or ITAR content you have into PreVeil, you're setting yourself to have that content protected to a great degree right away, right on day one. And that only takes a few days within you're getting started with PreVeil, so it's worth it to do that. The second reason is that the selected system should address a good number of the NIST controls that you're looking to address. So it's gonna meet those. So when you go to do your assessment, we're gonna talk about that in a minute. You're gonna be able to say, with PreVeil, I know I should be able to meet these different requirements. I might have to do some updates to the documentation. I may have to change a few things here or there, but basically I'm on a track to be able to meet those requirements. Many of our customers with PreVeil inherit, pretty much inherit controls for over 30 controls are addressed fully by PreVeil, and that's a great impact on your gap assessment. And then finally, the system that you move forward with will drive, your preferred approach in some cases for addressing the other controls. It'll imply some, the appropriate solutions there. So it helps put you on track to reduce the number of options, be able to move forward in a more streamlined fashion and get that done. Greg, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's just all.
Okay, great. And then just real quickly, I'm just going to one more quick on why PreVeil we believe is really a strong candidate here. PreVeil is zero trust security and an easy to use low cost system. We have a proven compliant solution that has real customers getting real compliance for CMMC through the GSVA assessment process today. We clearly meet and have been validated to meet all the key requirements for a cloud service provider supporting CUI. The PreVeil CUI Enclave approach helps many of our customers reduce the scope and the expense of managing CUI. And we do provide support for a good number of the NIST controls. And that, of course, accelerates your process as well. Okay, now back to dive into a little more detail on kind of scoping the boundary. And, Stephen, maybe it's a good time just to send this over to you. We, of course, you probably agree, this is one of the key things that is done early in the process for a company seeking certification. What do you recommend in terms of the approach here? And maybe what are some of the things you see go wrong as you catch them later in this process?
Absolutely. So first of all, one of the things I see go wrong is people tend to skip this step. It's really one of the very first things you should do. So many of the controls are technical and people think, well, I need to apply this to my entire IT system. And they go in and they just start hacking away at it and applying it to everything. But really, as you stated, this is all about protecting the data, protecting that CUI. So identifying where your CUI is, segregating that information system where you can to separate those things allows you to, in many cases, really zero in on where you have to implement these controls and what system you certify. So I can't stress enough the importance of doing scoping, but it's a requirement, and why scope your entire system if you don't have to. So I love your approach here, and I'm sure your video talks all about those things and why that's important. But the first thing that we suggest when people are scoping is identify where that CUI is or where it's going to be. Look at where it needs to be from a business standpoint. If you don't need to have hard copies of CUI, descope your printers. Don't allow it to be printed. If it doesn't need to be in a specific file system or file server, don't put it there. Third-party tools such as PreVeil's drive system, as well as their emails compliance system, are great ways to push some of this into a system where you have a shared responsibility with a provider that knows what they're doing, and they can do that piece of it for you. So love it when we see people use these tools that we're familiar with, that we know how they meet compliance and how they've implemented these things.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Stephen. I mean, I'll just add that to me, this particular step is critical because it has long-lasting implications for your project, not just through the initial project, but even beyond your initial certification. Because the larger this boundary is, the more systems that are in scope, the more individuals that are in scope, the more work, effort, time, money that's going to mean over the lifetime of your compliance journey. So obviously, you've got a business to run. You have to. Some people have to be in it. Some systems have to be in it. But make those decisions carefully because they will impact the overall cost and time associated with this. Okay, let's jump to the next one. So this is the, some details around the complete self-assessment. So you've gotten through some of the first couple steps. Now you're at the self-assessment stage. And Greg, maybe pass it over to you here, kind of, what's critical at this point, and then maybe we can have Stephen talk a little bit too about, since he's familiar with the third-party assessment, what advice can he give for someone going through this self-assessment process early?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is at the appropriate time in the journey. Now we're assuming you understand your boundary and your scope, and you know where COI is in your organization. You spend some time understanding the requirement. You've gotten familiar with the scoping guide and with the assessment guide that are offered in the draft format now, but very likely to match the final versions. And now you're going into, okay, how am I doing against each and every control? So you're going through the assessor's guide and you're looking at every control assessment objective one by one. Do I have this in place? Where is it in place? Is that reflected in my system security plan correctly? And just cranking through it. And basically you go through the whole process from top to bottom, and you end up getting an accurate picture of which controls are implemented and which controls represent plan of action and milestone items that you're going to have to do in the future and close out. But it really gives you a good starting point because now you know what the assessment boundary is, you understand the requirements, and now you're just checking how, which controls are implemented already and which ones are yet to be implemented.
Right. And I mentioned that we have a self-assessment guide here. We have a "Do I Need a Consultant" video as one of the things. That's kind of a uniquely named video. Greg, can you just provide a little more color on that? Like, what's the important decision that needs to be made here?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is cost versus time and urgency and prioritization, frankly. So, not all controls are created equal. So there's 110 controls there, and each one of them has multiple objectives under each, and it's a lot of tasks. And so many customers reach a point where saying, "Well, this area I'm not comfortable in. I don't really understand how to document or implement this particular area of the control set. I'm going to need to get some outside help for that." So there's an example of, well, maybe I lack expertise or confidence in particular areas. And then there's also, frankly, controls that are just bigger, more complicated. And do I want help getting the most difficult, largest, most complicated ones handled and wrangled? Or do I want to do that myself? And so there's some trade-offs here. So if you outsource, you get a consultant involved that has been there, done that. They understand how to document these controls. They can get in there and help out and take care of either, like I said, areas of particularly difficult controls or complex controls or things you just don't have time to get to. We have customers that have succeeded with very little consulting, and we have customers that have succeeded using lots and lots of consulting. So it's a whole, there's no one size fits all here. And this video goes through those trade-offs and how to think through whether or not you need a consultant and at what point. You may not need one at step one, but you may need them later in the process.
Yep. And Stephen, you might notice the line here which says produce an honest SPRS score. That's maybe a loaded word that we use there, but it's based on actual interactions with hundreds of folks in this space, hundreds of defense contractors, many of whom admit that some of the initial SPRS views they do are a bit aspirational. Why is it so important to be honest at this stage?
Well, you need to know what you need to work on. So, if you aren't honest with yourself during a gap assessment, then you're going to miss something. I can't tell you how many times we've gone into a client and they've performed a self-assessment and they have one score, and then we finish assessing them, and you see the light bulbs go off in their head as we're going through it. And, oh, we missed that, we missed this, and their score is, 9 times out of 10 lower than what they told us going in. Do you need a consultant? We do find that often our clients that use a consultant are more successful than those that don't. But there are a lot of great people that work for these companies, a lot of knowledgeable people, and there are times when a consultant isn't needed if you have one of those on your staff. But it's really important to understand each control, each assessment objective that goes with those controls, and fully look at every bit of your scope as you're assessing these, and being honest with where you're lacking, what it takes to get where you're going.
Yeah. No, thanks a lot. Appreciate that. Okay. Let's move on. Maybe related to that, and just to say, step number 8, we've kind of jumped ahead now. You've operationalized a lot of the improvements that you wanted to make, the enhancements required to address the controls. And now you're going to identify the self-readiness. Greg, this gets into a bit of what you were saying before about the options around how much of this you do yourself versus outsource. Maybe just clarify a little bit of that at this stage.
Sure. Yeah. And most of our customers, they're on a compliance journey, as you said, Vince, earlier. And that can range in time and resource intensity based on the type of business, the size of business, the scoping they've done, how large their scope is, complexity, a lot of moving pieces. But we can generalize to some extent, having seen hundreds of these companies. So, basically, we find three categories. There we have the do-it-yourself customer that really feels confident that if they put their best effort forward and really, pay attention to the details, that they can get through a lot of this on their own. And that tends to take the longest time, and those cycles can be the most elongated. And so if you don't have that kind of time to meet your objectives, you may want to look at ways to accelerate. And one of those is outsourcing some or all of the effort, right? So we have customers that don't have time to spend learning all about the requirements. They want to develop a high level of cursory knowledge of the requirement and what they're doing, and then they want to engage a third party to come in and do the lion's share of the work, right? Tweak the documentation, verify the scoping, do all the readiness work to see if they're ready, identify gaps, all that stuff. And so, that of course is the fastest approach, because consultants have methodologies also already in their practices. They know how to get through this without wasting any time. And of course, but there's more cash outlay when you outsource. So you're going to spend more money, but you're going to go faster. So there's another trade-off there. And lastly, we see hybrid approaches also typically common. And this is more what I talked about in the previous slide, which was, picking the things you want to outsource and saying, like, I want to outsource the heaviest documentation requirement because I don't have the cycles to write all these documents, or the most complex areas I want to outsource because I don't have confidence in them. So that's a common approach as well. But I think for each customer, they should look through, understand, having done their self-assessment process, they can make educated choices about where they're at and what's going to fit best for them. Stay the course, outsource, or do a combination, right?
Yeah. No, agreed. And I think we do find most of the time that hybrid approach is it makes the most sense. And that's going to vary based on the customer situation. What we'll say is our goal with the Compliance Accelerator is to make it more realistic that a customer can get pretty far along with DIY, do it yourself, if they have the resources and the willingness to work on that. And we want to make that as capable as possible. But there is no substitute for real CMMC expertise. And if you don't have that internally and you need that externally, PreVeil can provide some guidance. But when it really comes to consulting expertise, you'll want to work with a registered practitioner organization out in the marketplace. And we can recommend a number of those on our website through our preferred tailored program. Okay, now, Steve, we're getting right to your stuff here with step number 10. This is hopefully the final step in the process is selecting that that C3PO assessor that will work for you. And we've got some guidance here, but I'd really kind of like just to turn this over to Steve. And I know you work with a lot of companies that are considering different options for a C3PAO. What's the most important thing from your perspective that they're looking for? And when do you know when there's a match?
So you want to find a C3PAO that's going to be more of a partner than just someone that comes in and does a quick and dirty assessment. And now when I say partner, they can't provide you advisory services and be your independent assessor. So there's going to be some minimal things that they can tell you coming in, but you want someone who's going to work with you, someone who is going to provide you with flexible lead times, flexible assessment dates, someone that will talk to your leadership and learn about your company and spend a lot of time with you learning your system so that they can give an accurate assessment for you. Many of these will want to talk to you about doing multiple year engagements. You have to renew your certification every 3 years. This is a good thing. A lot of times you can lock in pricing this way. If you are happy with your C3PAO, you get to know the assessors. They're not going to be biased, but they're going to know your system and they're going to accurately be able to assess your system and understand it. And the more that they can understand, the better, the more accurate the assessment is going to be. So you want to look at cost, you want to look at availability. Right now, the JSV, Joint Surveillance Voluntary Assessment Program, is really, really a good way to get your initial assessment and your initial certification. With that, you can hire a C3PAO that will come in with DIBCAC and give you a DIBCAC. Well, DIBCAC will issue a score at the end of that. And then once the rule is final, that will convert to a CMMC certification for you, assuming you've passed with a 110 score. And once the rulemaking is in place and this goes into effect for contracts, there's going to be 300,000 defense contractors wanting to hire a C3PAO to do their initial assessment all at once. And there's only about I think 54 of us at the last count. That's a high demand and a low supply situation there. So anything you can do to get ahead of the game, if you think you guys are ready to do a joint surveillance, I highly recommend that. The availability is going to be a factor once the rulemaking goes into place.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Stephen. And just one follow-up question there. So, we really value the relationship we have with Centaur. We know you guys are professionals and do exactly what you need to do to make sure that, when you do these assessments, they're spot on from what the DoD is expecting of you. However, what's the advantage for a PreVeil customer when they come to you? What's the advantage? You're a PreVeil partner because you're familiar with PreVeil. You understand what we're bringing to the table. What does that mean for our customer?
Absolutely. So PreVeil is for the most part, you guys provide the same services for your clients, or maybe different packages, but you meet the security requirements the same way from client to client. Mm-hmm. We still review that. We still make sure that that's implemented correctly and that they're doing that. But we understand how you meet compliance. We understand what's behind it. And when you bring a C3PAO that is not familiar with your tool, they have to learn it from the ground up. They may have to go to PreVeil and ask specific questions about a configuration that they don't understand. They don't understand what sort of encryption you're using or what other tools you might have in place to meet the requirements. We find that when we're assessing a company that is using a tool that we're familiar with, that we may have assessed for another client already, if 50% of the controls are identical to a client we've already assessed, while we're still looking at that, we understand it more quickly, and we know what to look for. We know what windows and checkboxes to see in configuration. So it makes the assessment go quicker. It makes it go faster, and a lot of times there's cost savings because we know they're going to meet certain requirements by using a tool we're familiar with. We're able to save on the costs, on our costs there, and then we can present a lower price to your clients there.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Stephen. Saving time and money is what this session was about. I really think that helps sum it up. PreVeil's offering in terms of overall solution, what we're offering the Compliance Accelerator, what we're offering with our valued partnership with organizations like Centaur is really all about saving time and money for our customers. So, Greg, anything else to add before we wrap up the formal part of the program here?
Sure. I'd just say one more thing is that compliance is not a one and done deal. Compliance is forever. So, that's why the accelerator content will continue to evolve and change over time as the requirements change and as we learn more things from our installed base and hundreds of audits start happening. We're going to fine tune and improve that content over time. So just stay tuned for that.
Very good. Very good. All right. We're going to move on to, we got about 5 or 10 minutes for some Q&A. So I'm just going to show this contact information for a little while. So anyone who wants to grab that for Stephen at Centaur or the PreVeil team, please get that information, and then we'll see if we can handle a question or two. Orly, what do you have for us?
All right. Great job, guys. Thank you very much, Stephen. I'm going to just first throw out a question that I think Stephen is best qualified to answer. It says, are there any criteria needed to qualify for a POA&M conditional license, or is it just, get 80% of those controls done and you can qualify?
You do have to meet under formal CMMC. So I'm not speaking on the JSV here. We've seen with the JSV assessments that you don't need to meet 80% to be able to POA&M some of these items. But under the formal CMMC, under the way the assessment process is now, which is still in draft, you must meet 80% of the controls, and that's 80% of the total number. So that's 88 of the 110. Of those that you may not be meeting, there are only certain ones they will allow to be POA&M'd. Now, that is still a bit of an unknown at this point. We speculate that only the ones that are valued at 1 point using the SPRS scoring system will be allowed to be on the POA&M, but that has not been stated yet what that criteria will be. So we don't really know that, but we do know that you must meet at least 88 of the controls, and that anything that is POA&M'd, you'll have just 180 days to resolve that. And when I say resolve that, I mean 180 days to resolve it and then bring your C3PAO back in to confirm that you have resolved it. So be sure to work that time in there. Don't go to your C3PAO on day 179 and say, here's my evidence, I've closed this, please grade me. They may not be available, especially with the supply and demand issue I mentioned earlier. They may not be able to get back and review those right away. So I would at least allow for a month or so for your C3PAO to come back and assess that you've sufficiently closed out those POA&M items.
All right. Thank you very much, Stephen. My next question is one that was repeated a couple of times throughout the Q&A. That is, how's the Compliance Accelerator differ from some of the packaging that PreVeil has offered in the past?
Sure, I can take that. Yeah, for any existing customers that are on the call and already have either core compliance documents, PreVeil University, or what we've termed in the past our compliance bundle, this will be an enhancement to all that. If you already have access to our compliance bundle, as it's termed, this will be a natural evolution of that, and you can get access to that at any time by contacting your customer success manager at PreVeil. So go ahead and get that set up so that you can make sure you've now got access to the latest version of this, and that's excellent. If you have some other component and you're not sure how to get to this, again, contact your customer success manager at PreVeil, or simply email customersuccess@preveil.com, and the appropriate customer success manager will get back to you and let you know if what you have can be easily upgraded here to the Compliance Accelerator, or if there might be, what it takes to get you from where you are today to there.
Okay. Here's a question that is probably best directed to Greg. So if someone is looking at adopting our PreVeil Compliance Accelerator, you recommend using a GRC?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, maybe. I think if you what GRC is governance, risk, and compliance for the folks that didn't know that, and there are a lot of tools available out in the market that help automate and provide structure or project management tracking for your compliance efforts. So you can track all these actions, and you can have a system that automatically generates your POA&M and bugs people when they owe you things, and has workflow and has reporting, so you can see where you're at any given time, kind of like with nice charts, red, yellow, green areas of risk. All that stuff is great and can really help you understand your project management aspects of the compliance journey. We would recommend a GRC tool for sure. You can manage this process on spreadsheets and checklists and other artifacts. Definitely can do it either way. But the GRC tools provide that extra level of automation and the assignment of responsibilities and the workflow, frankly, and the reporting. So and it also helps structure your evidence. So arguably your assessment might be easier because your evidence is all in one system. So those are a few reasons to consider a GRC tool. We recommend them. We like them.
And I would just add, Greg, that all the PreVeil content that we're talking about here can be easily, moved into GRC tools, either through standard cut and paste, or in some cases we have integrations with certain GRC tools as well. So please contact PreVeil if you have any further questions about that. We'd be happy to line you up with certain GRC vendors that we work with, or just let you know that you can use your documentation in other GRC tools as well.
All right. This might be the last question. I will throw it out to Stephen. Stephen, how does someone get started in contacting the JSVA? The question is specifically, how do they get into the JSVA process?
Okay, so every C3PAO that's out there is authorized to conduct a JSVA. So you would start by contracting with a C3PAO. If you go to the cyberab.org website, you can find a marketplace to find all the C3PAOs that exist. Once you've chosen and contracted with a C3PAO, they will submit your information to the CyberAB, who then acts as a clearinghouse and funnels those in order of which they were received to DCMA, who runs DIBCAC. DIBCAC will then schedule that JSV for you, and then from there it's your company, the C3PO, and DIBCAC performing that work. But you start by contracting with the C3PAO.
Right. People want to contact Stephen. We shared that information just a couple moments ago. I don't know if you want to repeat how people can get in touch with you if they want to find out more about how Centaur can help them.
Yes, absolutely. We conduct JSV assessments ourselves. We've contracted with several to do this. You can reach me at Stephen with a PH .pratt@centaur.com. I'm happy to follow up with any of you that want to reach out to me directly and give you some pricing.
Thanks again, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you.